Paul, for me, is one of those great thinkers who helps provoke and challenge and bring incredible insight on how we can think differently and better around all of our life. So Paul is a pastor in a place near Johannesburg called Centurion with his wife. He has 3 children, and he's been visiting the last week, myself and my team here, and really bringing some fantastic leadership input. So he's a real expert in leadership. He helps coach executives and teams in many different corporations around Johannesburg and travels extensively around Africa. And it's brilliant to have him here in Manchester today. Supporter of Man United. He's actually given up tickets to be here right now. How about that? So he wants to be here, wants to share his knowledge and insight with us. And then off the back of anything that you hear that you think, oh, that's brilliant stuff that Paul's brought, you can just check out his website, which is paulnyamuda.com at the bottom. So he's got loads of materials, he's got a YouTube channel, got loads of stuff. But as a church, we just wanted to bring this to people, just to serve them, to encourage, and just to serve our community here in Manchester. So really hope you look forward to what Paul brings and some of the insights and learning today. So I'll pass on to Paul. Please welcome him.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. I really appreciate that. Alan and Ruth, I go way back with them, I think about 15 years now, since about 2005, when we hosted you guys when we were still in Zimbabwe. Thank you. It's a privilege and an honor for me to be sharing with you in this great city of Manchester. When you mentioned that I'd given up some tickets, I know some of you are thinking, well, understandably so, Paul, understandably so. So I'm going to dive straight into it. We're going to have an exercise somewhere in the middle, and then we will continue. One of the challenges I've seen that people face when it comes to trying to be successful is that they've got a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset, okay? The fixed mindset is that mindset that says, you know what, these guys were so successful because they were born on the right side of the railway track. You know, there's nothing I can do about my mediocrity. You know, I just wasn't born in the right family, right? But people who become successful have a growth mindset. And that's that mentality that says, you know what, if you put your mind to something, if you work on that particular thing and you do what successful people do differently, you can also get similar results, all right? So I'm a student of success. I like studying success. I like exploring these things. I've got a coaching business where I coach executives, I coach leaders, and I apply these same principles. But with the few minutes I have with you, we're going to just dive straight in and see if we can assist in taking you from good to great, okay? Or if you're already great, then great to greater. Is my English okay, right? Great, greater, greatest, all right? If you're already the greater one, we can take you to being the greatest, okay? So what do successful people do differently? This is the definition I like of success by a guy called Paul J. Mayer. Success is the progressive realization of predetermined worthwhile personal goals. Success is the progressive realization of predetermined worthwhile personal goals. All right. Paul J. Mayer, he started a company, an organization called SMI, Success Motivation International. And for many years, he's been helping out people with success. Success is the progressive realization. So it doesn't mean you've arrived, but at least you're heading in the right direction. Often when I coach people, one of the key questions I ask them is, do you like who you're becoming? You like who you're becoming? And sometimes people have said to me, no, Paul, I don't. Paul, 5 years ago when I joined corporate, I was this nice, sweet, loving, warm person. But now I've become like this monster. Okay, I don't like who I'm becoming, right? So ask yourself that same question. You see, great leaders don't have all the answers, but great leaders ask questions that get to the heart of the matter. So I love asking people questions they've never been asked before. When you ask someone a question they've never been asked before, you get them to think about things they've never thought of before. When they think about things they've never thought of before, they end up saying things they've never said before. And when they say things they've never said before, they end up doing things that they've never done before, because your tongue is a rudder. It shapes the direction of your life, not so. So great leaders ask good questions. So the good question I'm asking you is, do you like who you're becoming? You can answer. It's not a rhetorical. Yes. Okay. So I take it the people who are keeping quiet, you're on the other side. Okay. No. And then what I find amazing about this definition, he talks about personal goals. Okay. Talks about personal goals. So what success looks like for me is not necessarily the same as what success looks like for you. Right? Because we're different. Each person is unique. And one of the worst things we can do is to compare ourselves too much with the people around us. I always say this, never compare yourself with the people around you, rather compare yourself with your potential. You see, it's healthy if I keep saying to myself, Paul, what I've accomplished right now, this particular year, was I the best version of myself? Because if I compare myself with people around me, what if they're mediocre? What if they're average? Then I can think I'm doing really, really well, but because I'm surrounded by average people. All right? So your goals are very personal. Your goals are very personal. So let's start off with the first thing that successful people do differently. And this is not exhaustive. If I had more time with you, we would unpack other things. But I want to highlight a few. The first thing is that they set goals. They set goals. And this is something a lot of people don't do. And sometimes we don't set goals because hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. There's a famous proverb that says that hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. So sometimes we've stopped hoping because we don't want to be disappointed. You know what I'm talking about, right? We've stopped setting goals because we're like, you know what? If I aim at nothing, then, at least I won't fail. But we know that if you aim at nothing, that's what you get. That's what you'll hit, nothing. Okay? So not making a decision is a decision in and of itself, right? So successful people set goals. What is a goal? What is a goal? A goal is a dream with a deadline. That's what it is. A goal is a dream with a deadline. And what happens with a lot of people is they think they're a goal setter, but they're actually just a dreamer. So a lot of us dream. This morning I was speaking on the power of the imagination, and so important, so crucial to dream. But we have to put a deadline to our dreams. Not so. How many of you have ever tried to play tennis, but not in sets and not in games, just hitting the ball to the other person and so on? Becomes a bit of a problem, If it's not divided up as a game, it becomes demotivating because the other guy has got 73 and you've got 3, and you're thinking to yourself, how am I going to catch up? But the way those games are designed, golf, right? My wife is from a strong golfing family. Her mom was captain of Zim Women's Golf and so on. And it's divided up into holes, isn't it? Okay, so is table tennis, so is tennis. So a goal is a dream with a deadline. If someone comes up to me and says, Paul, I want to lose weight this year. I want to lose weight. Is that a goal? No. It's not a goal, it's a wish. All right? But if that same person comes to me and says, Paul, you know what? I want to lose weight this year. And this is my ideal weight. Therefore, by June next year, I need to have lost 7 kgs. I'm enlisting Alan as my dietitian. I'm enlisting Josh as my personal trainer. And I'm going to make myself accountable to Robert. Is that a goal? It is, isn't it? Right? Now, goal setting is so powerful. You might have heard a similar story to what I'm about to share with you because they're different renditions of this. But in about 1950, around about 1953, at one of the top universities in the United States, there was a graduate class that was asked this question. They were asked, how many of you have got written down goals with action plans? How many of you? Only 3 hands. Out of the entire class, only 3 hands went up. Only 3. Okay? 20 years later, they interviewed that same group of people, and guess what they found? The 3 people that had written down their goals with action plans were generally happier and more fulfilled than the ones that didn't have goals. Now you say to me, but Paul, how do you measure happiness? You can actually measure happiness with some degree of accuracy, but I'm not going to go into that, okay? The 3 that had written down their goals with action plans were generally happier and fulfilled, right, than the rest of the class. But there's something you can measure, and you can measure it quite accurately, and that's net worth. The net worth of those 3 was greater than the combined net worth of the balance of the class. That's the power of goal setting. Okay? It's been found that when you write down your goals, you're 10 times more likely to accomplish them than when you just think about them. So my question to you is, do you have goals? Now, here's the thing. Some people have long-term goals, and that's great. 20-year plan, 10-year plan. I'm told that in China, they think in centuries. One of my sister-in-laws, she was a professional golfer, won a tournament in China. She came back and she said, Paul, these guys, they build highways, what we call highways. You guys call them motorways, right? They build these between cities, and there are hardly any vehicles in the cities because they think in centuries. They're planning ahead, okay? Sadly, in parts of South Africa, like in Johannesburg, there are a lot of new buildings going up, new houses being built, but we're not seeing a change in terms of the road system. And then people are stuck in traffic all the time, okay? Because where I come from, our problem is we just think in terms of the present and the past. So it's great to have vision. It's great to have long-term goals, 20-year plan, 10-year plan, 5-year plan. But you know what's also great when we're talking about goal setting? To have a 90-day plan. To have a 90-day plan. Because a 90-day plan is not tomorrow, but it's also not in 5 years' time. And to say to yourself, the secret to greatness is hidden in your daily routine. This morning, someone asked me this, Paul, how do you do what you do? What's the key to your success? And then I said, it's my use of time. It's my use of time. We've all been given 24 hours in a day. The difference between us is how we use the 24 hours. Okay? So there's long-term goals, but there's also how am I going to use today? All right? So successful people are goal setters. Ask yourself, what stops me from setting goals? Just think about it. Because if you understand how you learned a certain behavior, it becomes easier to unlearn it. What stops me from setting certain goals? For many people, it's the fear of failure, isn't it? It's if I set this goal, I might not achieve it. So let me just not set it. Then I'll be happy. But it's counterintuitive. You won't be happy. Because in the back of your mind, subconsciously, you know what you wanted. Okay? The second thing is that successful people are action-orientated. They're action-orientated. They don't just talk about things. They make sure they execute. There's a guy called John Cotter from Harvard, and he talks about 8 reasons why lasting change doesn't take place in organizations. And one of the reasons is a lack of a sense of urgency for change. And he's actually got a book on a sense of urgency. Okay? One of the greatest leadership qualities, I believe, because great leaders have a bias toward action. One of the greatest leadership qualities is mobilizing people toward an action in terms of getting people to move. That's the word motivate, isn't it? Movere. How many of you studied Latin, right? Right? How can we kind of like put a bit of, vroom into people? That's what leaders do. They move people from A to B. They create an environment where people want to move from A to B. You can see leadership is my passion, right? Now, one of the ways we become action-orientated is we overcome procrastination. Again, if you understand how you learned certain behavior, it becomes easier to unlearn it. So, why do we procrastinate? Very often it's fear, isn't it? Right? Sometimes it's fear of failure. Sometimes it's fear of success. I've heard people saying, you know what, Paul, I don't want to be too successful because I'll be in the limelight and then everyone will notice me. And in their brain, at some point, they associate being in the limelight with rejection. So it's like, you know what? It's just me and my family. Us 4 and no more. Let me stay in the background. Then there's no opportunity for rejection. Let me reject myself before I can be rejected. It's a self-protective mechanism, isn't it? Okay? So that's a biggie. Sometimes what we call fear of failure isn't really the fear of failure. We don't have a problem failing. Sometimes it's the fear of being blamed. Have you noticed that? Especially in the workplace. You say to someone, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And the thing they're visualizing is their boss is over there pointing that finger saying, it's your fault. It's the fear of blame. If their boss is shorter than them, it's your fault. And if their boss is shorter than them but wears stilettos, it is your fault. Okay. So fear, that's a biggie. Sometimes it's also the fear of being ridiculed or mocked. It's what comes with failure. The fear of being ridiculed or mocked. The fear of embarrassment. I say to some people, come up and speak. Come and present to the people. No, Paul, I might make a mistake. What's wrong with making a mistake? Are you too proud to make a mistake? Right? The second one is an interesting one. Inner vows. Inner vows. Very often, you will find that we procrastinate because of vows that we've made, and those inner vows control our destiny. What do I mean by an inner vow? I've got a friend, he's about 70 years of age. He turned 70 this year. He's an American guy, and he shared with me an interesting story a couple of years ago. He said, Paul, you know what? When I was young, I was playing baseball. It was one of the American sports. I think it was baseball. I was playing baseball, and my dad would mock me when I would strike out or when I would make a mistake. My dad would mock me. And he said, Paul, I made an inner vow as a young boy that never again will I place myself in a position where I can be mocked or ridiculed. That's what he said. And he says, from that time onwards, I embraced it as part of my personality that, you know what, I'll be the guy in the background. And he saw it as being the humble guy, being the servant leader. And his mindset was, you know what, I'm not arrogant like those guys. I don't need to be in the forefront. I'll just serve in the background. And he lived his life like that until he dealt with that inner vow. And what is amazing is when he had dealt with that inner vow, this guy now speaks all over the world. He's written a book on entrepreneurship. He owns a recruitment company that's based in the Dallas area. So ask yourself again, are there any inner vows that I've made that are actually controlling my action orientation? Does that make sense? Okay? It applies to a lot of us. If you've made an inner vow against a particular ethnic group, for example, like I'll never do business with those guys. Happens a lot where I come from, okay? I was teaching this to some entrepreneurs, and one of the guys said, so true. He realized that, Paul, you know what? I've got prejudice in me. Because I said to myself, I don't want an agent from that ethnic group to sell my house. I'm going to look for someone from my own ethnic group. And then he gave this guy a chance, and the guy did a good deal for him, and it was wonderful. And he says, I procrastinated because I couldn't find someone from my ethnic group. And so I would say, oh, let me first paint the house. Let me first let me retile it. His prejudice was based on an inner vow that he would never do business with those people. See, we can't be successful by ourselves. We need other people. And if we block out the very people that I believe God is sending into our lives to bless us and to take us to our next level, then we have a problem. There's no self-made man. Some people are trying to be successful, but their motive for success is, you know what? I want all the glory myself. I want to take all the credit myself, right? There's no self-made man. I might have done various things written. People say, Paul, how did you do so? I've done 35 books. People are like, how did you do so many books and so on? I said to Alan just now, I said, I've got a great team. I've got people who help me. I've got designers. I've got people who edit. I have people who help me with the manuscript. I've got people who help me with some of the transcribing for some of the books. Okay? There's no self-made man. That's why one of the keys to being successful is knowing how to work with other people. It's what I call enrolling others. Sometimes what happens is we procrastinate because of indecisiveness. Are you that kind of person where your self-esteem has become so low that sometimes you make a decision and you just feel it in your gut that this is what I should do, but you're always backtracking? You're always backtracking afterwards. You're always second-guessing yourself. Okay? Perfectionism is a biggie. With perfectionists, what we say to them is, you know what? Just get started. You don't have to wait for the perfect team, the perfect time. Just get started. You can always refine later on. You don't have to refine from the start. Resentment is a biggie. We sometimes procrastinate because we become resentful toward the people who are asking us to do the particular thing. Right? Maybe it's your boss at work. And they say to you, hey, can you do A, B, C, D for me, please? And what do? You say yes on the outside, but inside you're sitting down. Because deep inside you're experiencing a workplace wound what I call a workplace wound. There's so many people who are wounded. I'm a psychologist, by the way, by profession, more organizational psychology. And there are so many people that are wounded in the workplace. But it's almost like the battered wife syndrome. You know what I mean? It's like, but I'm paid at the end of the month. So that's okay. I'll continue with the abuse. And so that workplace wound causes you to go on a personal go slow. You know those personal go slows, right? Your boss says, I want you to do A, B, C, D for me. And you're like, you know what, I'm going to take my time about it because last time when I asked for this and I asked for that, you guys took your time. So this is my way of punishing you. But this is not something that we're conscious of, eh? It's happening subconsciously. There's so many ways we punish each other. It's amazing. Okay? Sometimes we're avoiding the difficult conversation, and that's why we procrastinate. Very often when you want to advance, when you want to achieve success in a particular area, it involves having a difficult conversation. You decide, I want to start a business. You have to have a difficult conversation with your spouse, right? Say, you know what, honey, I think we're going to have to cut down because a lot of our money, extra income is going to go into this business, right? That's a difficult conversation. Maybe it's having a conversation with a supervisor at work who values your input. And now you have to tell them that, you know what, I think in the next 6 months, I'm going to be leaving. Ask yourself, are there things you want to do in life, but you're a slave to other people's opinion? Sometimes when I'm speaking to certain people that I'm leading, I've said this a couple of times to them, your opinion of me won't affect my destiny. You see, I think so often we slow down the things that we should be speeding up because we're so worried about what people will think of us. One of the key things I say to people is, you know what, ask yourself, what's the worst thing this person can do to me? Then we realize it's tiny, it's a molehill, right? Also ask yourself, you know what, if they reject me and they're upset with me, how will I view it a year down the line from now? Oh, I would have forgotten about it. And that just gives you a bit of perspective, isn't it? Okay? Sometimes we're not action-orientated and we procrastinate because of incorrect priorities. Have you noticed that whenever you procrastinate, it's not like you're sitting still not doing anything? Whenever you're procrastinating, you're just not keeping the main thing the main thing. Whenever you're procrastinating, you're busy, but you're busy with second things first, not first things first. So for example, maybe you need to be studying. You've got some exams that are coming up. Then I go and I visit you and I realize you've become an expert dishwasher. You know, your kitchen is super clean. And you're saying to me, Paul, you know what? I cannot study. I really cannot study with a filthy kitchen. And that's what you're spending most of your time doing, right? So ask yourself, the thing I'm supposed to be doing, the thing that I was born to do in this life, am I actually running with that and doing it? Very often the money follows, by the way. When you pursue your passion, very often the money follows. Am I doing that thing or am I doing the counterfeit? One of the keys to success is keep the main thing the main thing. And the way it looks if you're a leader is the people I care about the most. What do they need from me that only I can give them? Give them that, the rest you can delegate. The people I care about the most, what do they need from me that only I can give them? The rest you can delegate. Okay? For many of us, sadly, in life, what happens? We put our best foot forward for our customers, don't we? We give them the best of our intellect, of our emotions. We dress nicely and talk nicely. But if we're honest with ourselves, the people we say we love the most, often they get our leftovers. Our leftovers intellectually, our leftovers physically and emotionally. You know why that happens? Very often we're good at preparing to go to work. Few of us are good at preparing to go back home afterwards. You see, when I have finished a day's work and I get onto the motorway and I'm on my way back home, I have to start putting my dad cap on. I have to start putting my husband cap on because those are different roles I'm now about to play. So why do we procrastinate? Very often we're not keeping the main thing the main thing. Key question, do you know what the main thing is in your life? Sometimes we procrastinate because we actually disagree with the direction we are moving in. We actually disagree with what we've been asked to do. And instead of having that tough conversation to actually say, guys, I need clarity. Guys, I don't understand. Guys, I see things differently. What do? We do other things and we just avoid that particular thing because we're just not feeling great about it. See, our emotions are important. Very often when you don't feel peace in your heart about a particular thing, it says something, doesn't it? It says like, there's a reason for it. Maybe you need to have that conversation. Okay. The third thing I want to highlight about successful people, what they do differently, is they're resilient. They're resilient. My wife is a triathlete. She does triathlons, right? We all know triathlons, right? And one of the things they teach you in endurance sport is resilience, right? So we came back recently. She made world champs, and we came back from Nice recently, okay? Just wanted to show you that, yeah, there are levels in this kind of thing, and I'm proud of her. But we came back recently, and when she was in Nice, the cycle, imagine cycling 90 Ks, but literally the incline was 1,400 meters, okay, for that first 45 Ks. Okay, quite a tough race. Then we decided to go to Paris afterwards, but you could see the triathletes were still sort of like quite stiff from and it's quite a lot emotionally. But one of the things that amazes me about her is the mental toughness that she has. So in sport, we're taught that. We're taught resilience. She comes from a strong swimming background, and when she's there in the water, especially open water swimming, some of you are familiar with that, you've got a whole lot of men kicking your head and doing all sorts of things. It's the washing machine effect, right? Now you have to be very resilient because you're continuously sighting, aren't you, to make sure you're moving in the right direction, all right? So where am I going with this? In sport, they teach you resilience. But in life, we tend to learn resilience through the school of hard knocks, not so. I want to ask you a question. Are you living by design or by default? Are you learning resilience by design, intentionally, or by default through the struggles you face in life? So what is resilience? What is resilience? I like this definition of resilience. It's to withstand or recover quickly from difficult situations. I think many of you in this room, you like the game football. What do you experience when you're watching football that annoys you? You notice that some guys, they get knocked down and they stay down very long, right? Other guys, they get knocked down and they're very quick up, and then they score a goal. A lot of people will say, I'm resilient, because they bounce back, but it takes them 9 months to bounce back. Other people say, I'm resilient, and they genuinely are because they're very quick at bouncing back. So resilience is to do with how quickly you bounce back. You see, in organizations today, you can have two people, one very smart, the other one not so smart. But the one who ends up being a success is the one who's more resilient, not so. Because the one who's very smart can stand up and speak, and people don't like his speech, and they crumble, and they resign. It's happened before. Someone is like, oh, my boss doesn't like my presentation. I can't handle this. This is the final straw. They leave the organization. You know that in the retail industry, and I don't know if this applies in the UK, but one of the pieces of research I saw years ago was that in the retail industry, in terms of restaurants that we see in malls, it's been found that it works out on the 7th try. In other words, a lot of the restaurants we see today aren't necessarily the best. They're the ones that have outlasted the others because of resilience. One of the things I've learned is don't give up. If I've got an idea, I did a masterclass recently and only a handful of people pitched up for the masterclass. Now, some other things I do, my marriage coaching and things like that, we have large crowds coming. So I started these leadership masterclasses and I was like thinking it was going to be really, really great, but only a handful of people came. Guess what? I'm going to be setting up a schedule. When I go back home, I'm going to be setting up a schedule for my masterclasses for next year. Right? Don't give up. Don't give up. If I have to tweak things, I'll tweak them. Right? That's resilience. Resilience is a term that we also use when we're talking about health. So I've been blessed with 3 boys, 13, 11, and 10. So there's lots of testosterone in our household, right? And sometimes I might use terms like, my kids are so resilient, they lasted right through winter without catching the flu, right? So we use it when we're talking about health. So here's the question I have for you. How much flu are you catching? I'm speaking metaphorically, right? How much flu are you catching? In other words, when the people around you start coughing, do you also sneeze? I was working with a particular organization. We call them NGOs. Do you guys call them NGOs? Right? I was working with a particular NGO and I was talking about this concept and I said, you guys feed off each other. That's what I've noticed. You feed off each other. When one person starts and they're negative, then the rest of you are negative. When another person starts and they're positive, then the rest of you are positive. They said, Paul, it's so true. In our open plan situation, it was an L-shaped open plan scenario. And they said the tension starts here and it literally just spreads. In psychology, it's called emotional contagion, right? And it just spreads. How resilient are you? When you're watching your favorite football star and they're playing at the former home ground, what do the people do to him? They're playing at the former home ground. What do the people do? You guys should know this. I thought I'd have quicker answers. Isn't this where football was produced? They boo him, right? Are you guys into other sport? I know Robert is into hiking and so on. Like, what are you? Okay, anyway. They boo the person, right? Boo, boo, boo. Now, isn't it wonderful when you still see your favorite star being booed, but they dribble past people and they still score? That is resilience. Resilience is being able to block out the naysayers. What voices are you hearing in you? What inner villages are you hearing in you? Those inner voices of negativity saying you can't do that, you won't succeed. Your personal voice has to be louder than those other voices. Not so. Keys to success. The other thing about successful people is that they take charge of their lives. They take charge of their lives. Do you feel like you're in charge of your life? Do you feel like you're in charge of your time? Someone was asking me earlier on, so Paul, what's the key to your success? And then, as I mentioned earlier on, I said the use of time. Now, to use your time effectively, you have to have boundaries, not so. I have to know, where do I end and where does the next person begin? But you know something I find so amazing? A lot of people, when they go to these family gatherings with extended family, social gatherings, etc., have you noticed that we end up at these functions and people spend like 3 or 4 hours there having small talk with people they don't really like, but just engaging in small talk. And everyone is second guessing everyone else, thinking it's rude for me to leave. I can't leave right yet, right now. And then you find someone plucks up the courage to leave. And what do they say? They always have to have an excuse. Sorry, guys, I have to take pick up my child from a play date, right? And then they're about to head out, and then everyone else says, oh, am I parking you in? Have I parked you in? All right, I think it's time for me to go too. And I've always wondered, at what point do all these people want to leave? At what point do they all want to leave? Very often I go to these environments and I've already pre-decided that, you know what, this is who I want to speak to. And I want to have a meaningful conversation with these few individuals. And then I do that and I feel so fulfilled. And when I have to leave, I don't have to explain myself. Okay? It's like, cool, guys, it's been real. So while Paul is editing his next book or whatever else I'm doing back at home, you've got these people just having small talk, second guessing each other, thinking the host is going to be offended if we choose to leave. There was a time I actually had a conversation with one of the hosts of that particular family gathering, and we're sitting down and we're talking about this concept. And I said, do you know what? Maybe she actually wants people to leave now. And I was talking to her also. And she kind of hinted that, yeah, it will actually be great if people leave right now. But we're second guessing the person, thinking they'll be offended. All right? How much do we do that? It's tiring, isn't it? Okay? So are you in charge of your life? Are you in charge of your emotions? And one of the key ways we do this is we have to set boundaries. So the first aspect is embrace your power. Embrace your power. Say to the person next to you, I am powerful. Now here's the interesting thing. Do you know why you were laughing? You know why you were laughing? You're not comfortable with power. Or you associate power with the abuse of power. Or you associate power with arrogance. There's nothing wrong with power and being powerful, right? We've been having a lot of power outages and load shedding. Do you guys ever have load shedding, saving electricity and so on? Okay, you don't understand the concept. Okay, it's fine. So we've been having that in South Africa quite a bit. And it's interesting because I said to some people, if I tell you that I didn't have power last night, if you're a kind, caring, reasonable human being, you would feel for me, right? So we're fine with power when it comes to electricity. But with being powerful as a person, we think, oh, what is that? What are you about to do? You're so arrogant. There's nothing wrong with power. Power is A's ability to make B do something B would otherwise not have done. That's what power is. And when power is exerted, it becomes influence. The problem isn't being powerful. The problem is what you do with your power. Does that make sense? It's what you do with your power. Do you use your power to serve people? Do you use your power to empower people? Right? A lot of people have got a zero-based view of power. What I mean by a zero-based view of power is this. I've got 10 units of power, right? And Pascal, it's Pascal here. Pascal has got 0 units of power. If I share my power with him and give him 2 units, he's up to 2 and I'm down to 8. If I give him another 2, he's up to 4 and I'm down to 6. If I give him another 2, he's going to catch up. I'm not going to give away any more power. But there's what we call the reciprocal nature of power. The reciprocal nature of power. What's that? The more power I give away, I'm basically empowering you to empower me to empower you. And the more power I give away, the more I'm surrounding myself with powerful people. So the more powerful I become. So we all become powerful. Does that make sense? And you see, there are different sources of power. Power source number 1 is expert power. There's power you have as a person because of what you know. And you can say as British people, like, no, this power thing isn't great. But a lot of you use your expert power. You do. It's power you have because of what you know. And becomes a power base that you can use to serve people around you. Successful people do that. Okay? The problem with expert power is that it's relative. What do I mean? If someone goes to their rural home, those who've got rural homes, I don't know if you guys have rural homes here, okay, but in Africa we've got rural homes, right? If they go to their rural home and they speak to their great uncle and they show their great uncle how to switch on a computer, the great uncle will say, oh, my granddaughter, you are an IT expert, right? But that same individual knows that when they are having conversations with their information technology friends, they should just keep quiet. Because expert power is relative, isn't it? Expert power is relative. Another source of power is social power. That's power you have because of who you know. You know, there's some people you're like, oh, don't mess with that guy. He's connected with so many people. Here's my question to you. Are you conscious of your relational assets? Are you conscious of the people around you who can help you to go from good to great? That's your social power. Some people are conscious of these people around them. Other people aren't. You know, you can have someone, they're stuck, they're using Excel or something and they're stuck, they don't understand the formulas or anything like that, right? And then you go up to them and you say, but you told me the other day that your uncle is an expert in Excel and he loves to help people. Oh yeah, let me contact him. So you are an asset-based thinker who's conscious of relational assets. This individual is a deficit-based thinker who's just thinking of the problem. Okay? You also have positional power. It's power people have because of their position. And that's not a great source of power, is it? You know those people, the moment they greet you, they're reeling off their CV. They're saying, I'm the senior, whatever it is. They complain and they say, like, my office is only 4x3. How come his office is 8x7? It's not fair. What happens when there's restructuring in the company? Your power goes because the focus of your power was on your position or your title. Then you have what we call personal power. Nelson Mandela had personal power. What is personal power? It's power you have because of your personal integrity, because of who you are. Nelson Mandela continued to influence even after he was president, not so? If you know the history, right? Continued to influence even after he was president. So that's personal power. That's power you have because of your moral authority. Who am I when no one is watching? Is the same Paul that's speaking to you now, is this the same Paul at home? You have what's called referent power. Referent power is power someone has because we admire them. If you heard that Bill Gates is in town and he's going to be speaking on how to make champions out of your kids, a whole lot of people will go. Even Apple people will go just to listen to Bill Gates, right? We don't know what he's like as a dad. I've heard some good things, but we don't really know what he's like as a dad. But people will go because it's Bill Gates. So when you are powerful in one environment, you can actually use that as influence in another environment. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me explain the concept of boundaries very quickly. It's something we're familiar with. There are different types of boundaries. And to be successful, especially when we want to take charge of our lives, it's so crucial to have boundaries. I'm not talking about collapsed boundaries. Some people have collapsed boundaries, right? Where they're a doormat and they say yes to everything. And then they're resentful and frustrated. Other people have rigid boundaries where you have to have 3 weeks in advance. You have to know exactly what your day is going to look like. And, to have an appointment with them, 5 weeks in advance. That's a rigid boundary. I'm talking about healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries. So I'll give you a couple of examples. An example of a boundary is you have what we call space boundaries. So beginning of 2017, my wife gets a new car and she says, kids, no eating in this car. It's her space and it's a boundary she was setting. I know some of you are thinking, Paul, how long did that last, right? I heard her reinforcing it quite recently. In fact, now her strategy is she gets our boys to vacuum her car, right? And they were asking recently, they're quite entrepreneurial. So, Mom, how much are you going to pay us for this? And I pointed out, guys, how come you want to be paid for cleaning up your own mess? Anyway, a space boundary is where you say, guys, no smoking in this lounge. And if you want to smoke, please go outside and just watch what direction the wind is blowing. It's your space. You're setting a boundary, right? Another example of a boundary is setting limits. Setting limits. If you've got a spouse who likes to entertain a lot, this is where you say, you know what, guys, carry on, but I'm going to bed now. I'm going upstairs. I'm going to bed. I've got an early start tomorrow morning. Successful people do that really, really well. Okay? When you want to take charge of your life, you have to ask yourself these questions. What are the things that fill me up? And what are the things that drain me? The things that fill you up, do them more and more. The things that drain you, do them less and less. What I've found is that people often wait for that annual holiday. But the problem is when they go on that annual holiday, they're operating at -10 in terms of feeling drained. Then when they get back from the holiday, they're back to 0. So they need a holiday from the holiday. You know what I'm talking about, right? The thing about this is continuously filling yourself up throughout the day. So what are some of the things that fill me up? If I have a good laugh with my brother Will, I know that if I pick up the phone and I have a good conversation with him, we've got a similar sense of humor, I'm guaranteed that I can make him laugh and he will make me laugh. Fills me up. Does that make sense? So you can come up with certain habits. In South Africa, I say to people, how many of you like off-road biking? And some people will give me an answer and I say, go to Sasol Garage and get that magazine. It's called Dirt. And you'll see the bikes there and so on. Purchase it. And throughout the day, whenever you have a coffee break, whenever you have a tea break, whatever it is, lunch break, just read a few pages of that magazine. You're topping yourself up throughout the day. Some people say, Paul, my work is so draining. My job is so draining. And I'm very quick to say to them, your job is not draining. You have a few draining moments at work. And you have to find out what those draining moments at work are. And very often when you do an emotional log on yourself, you realize, you know what? My job is actually really great and exciting. That's why I chose it. It's those 2 guys who really drain me. Because whenever I'm in a meeting with them, they suck the life out of me. Can you see where I'm going? You find that your day is really great until 4 p.m. when you have a meeting with those guys. Then you're like, how come I'm enjoying this week so much? Oh, the guys are on leave, right? So try to figure out what are the things that actually drain me. It's so subtle very often. Let me sort of land it this way before we have our exercise with some cards I want to take you through. There was a particular lady, she's about 37 years of age, 38, somewhere there. She's got, I think, 2 kids. She works in a pharmaceutical, and I was coaching her. Sat down with her and I said to her, what drains you? She said, Paul, as a working mom, my kids drain me. We're renovating our house at the moment, and often when I need to do some work on the house, my hubby and I, the kids want to play. And Paul, that drains me. I was very quick to say to her, your kids don't drain you. Your kids don't drain you. I said, I'll tell you what's draining you. The thing that's draining you is a debilitating rule that you've created for yourself about what a perfect mom looks like. And I said to her, you trying to be a mom like your mom was. Her mom had passed away about 11 months earlier, and her mom was a classic nurturer. She was a headmistress or deputy headmistress. And I said, you are trying to be a mom like your mom. And when you fail to do so, you feel guilty, and that's what's draining you. She said, Paul, you've hit the nail on the head. It's not just my mom. Also, my sister. My sister is an occupational therapist, and she's always telling us, this is what you must do with the kids. This is what you must do with the kids. This is what you must do with the kids. I want to ask you that question. What's draining you? Can you see how subtle it is very often? What debilitating rules have you created for yourself? And how can you displace those rules with empowering rules? What debilitating rules have you created for yourself? And how can you displace them with empowering rules? So I'm going to ask you, if you look at this, you will see something else that drains us, and we end up not being in charge of our time. There's conventional time management, which is at 8 o'clock I do this, 9 o'clock I do that. But there's what's called inner time management. Inner time management is, this is how I was feeling at 8 o'clock, and this is how I was feeling at 11 o'clock. And when you do this type of emotional log on yourself, it's so powerful because you're monitoring your energy levels over time. Can you see that? And what tends to happen with a lot of people is we do things at the wrong time of the day. So what used to happen to me is I thought I was a bit of a night owl, and I would work hard through the night, working, because psychologically I couldn't reward myself with sleep until I'd finished a particular piece of work. And I remember my wife would say to me, you know what, this isn't working well for you, because I was starting to fall asleep while I was still working. She says, why don't you go to bed earlier and then get up earlier? And she was right, because something that would take me 3 hours late at night to do, early in the morning could take me maybe 2 hours or 1.5 hours. You know what I'm talking about, right? So what's the best time of day for you to do what you need to do? If you're like me, usually around 3 o'clock, it's not the greatest time for me to do intellectually taxing work, because lunchtime is way back here and supper time is way ahead there. I think you guys call it tea time, right? It's way ahead there, right? And I'm not snacking enough. Are you doing things at the right time of the day so that you're fully productive and fully immersed and fully absorbed in what you're doing? So now I'm going to ask you to say that statement again. I am powerful, but this time say it like you really mean it to the person next to you. Still a bit of discomfort amongst these people. Let me land it this way. Let me land it this way. For the last 11 years or so, and I'm not exaggerating when I say this, for the last 11 years or so, when people say to me, Paul, how is life treating you? Do you know what my response is? And Alan, you've probably heard me saying this before. You know what my response is? When they say, Paul, how's life treating you? Guess what I say? I'm treating it well, thank you. Got married almost 17 years ago. People say, Paul, how's married life treating you? I'm treating it well, thank you. We moved from an area called Four Ways to an area called Centurion in 2010, right? People say to me, Paul, how's Centurion treating you? I'm treating it well, thank you. Do you know why I say that? The influence and impact on the world around me, right? The influence and impact that I have on the world around me is bigger than it has on me. And that's the mindset of powerful people. And every single person in this room is powerful. I can be crawling in traffic, going at 5 k's an hour, stuck on what we call a highway. You guys call it the motorway. Stuck, late for a client. But you know what? I've made a decision. I'm a joyful person. And I'm not going to give the traffic power over my mood. Now, athletes do that, don't they? They condition themselves emotionally to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is how I'm going to feel. Right? But how do most people live? They get into that open plan scenario at work, and the first thing they say is, what mood is the boss in today? If the boss is in a bad mood, they spend the rest of the day trading on eggshells. How many of you have used this phrase in the last 6 months? She just drives me up the wall. She just drives me up the wall. Or he just drives me up the wall. Maybe more hands will go up now. Okay? Right? Now let me ask you a question. Does he or she place you on their bonnet? You guys call them bonnets also, hey?
Yeah, the bonnets at the front of the car.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Does he or she place you on top of their bonnet and physically drive you up the wall? They don't. You end up the wall because you are reacting, not responding. And powerful people do this. They say, this is who I am. This is who I want to be. This is how I'm going to live out my life despite the environment. Does that make sense? So let's take charge of our lives. So we're going to press pause, and I'm going to give you some of my purpose finder cards, okay? And give each person one. And I'm going to ask you to get into pairs and have a quick 5-minute discussion answering the questions. And this is what will show us how well you've thought through in terms of your future aspiration. Okay? So, how did you find that process, thinking about these types of things?
They're difficult questions, I thought.
There are difficult questions there, and you only got one. So often when I'm coaching people, like I take them through all of them, right? So, but when you answer questions like this, it's extremely powerful, isn't it? Because it gets you to think about things that you don't typically think about on a daily basis. But that's where the secret to your success lies, okay? So I'm going to move on and see how we can land this. Successful people are assertive. I didn't say aggressive, assertive. On the one extreme, we've got aggression. Cheers, Robert.
Thank you.
Thanks. On the one extreme, we've got aggression. And that's when someone has a mindset of, I'm okay, you're not okay. On the other extreme, we've got passivity. When someone is passive, they become like a doormat, don't they? Right? And their mindset is, I'm not okay, you guys are all okay. Our goal is assertive. And assertiveness is basically where your mindset is, I'm okay enough to stand up for my rights. You are okay enough for me to do so respectfully. The word assertive comes from an interesting Latin word that literally means to declare. Literally means to declare. And it's not just talking about declaring something that's negative. It can also be, hey, nice shoes, right? Oh, cool, nice scarf, right? It's where you declare something and you feel comfortable at an emotional level doing so, all right? That's assertiveness. And can you see that a lot of what we've spoken about this afternoon is linked to this? We have to have strong assertiveness skills to be able to assert boundaries. And very often it comes from a place of self-respect. One of my books is on building your self-esteem, and I've got 6 pillars of self-esteem. And one of those pillars is a sense of self-respect. A sense of self-respect, okay? So powerful people live by design and not by default, all right? Successful people are high-trust people. It's business at the speed of trust, isn't it? It's business at the speed of trust. People do business with you because they trust you. One of my clients, for 3 years in a row, they paid me up front for everything I was going to do for them for that particular year. There wasn't some big contract signed or anything. It was just an email saying, this is what Paul is going to do. They trusted me. And to be in business, we have to be trusted. So there's what we call the high trust leader, and there's certain behaviors associated with that particular individual. And one of the keys to being successful is being trusted. Just ask yourself that question: do people trust me? When you think of someone who's a high trust person, someone who's very trustworthy, who you trust, what are some of their characteristics? They're honest, empathy, they're very caring, they're reliable, they've got an ask once policy, right? You ask them once and you know it will be done. You don't have to send reminders or follow through and so on, right? You ask them something and you go to bed at night and you're at peace. You know it will be done. Now, the things you've mentioned, are they the same? Is being reliable the same as being honest? Not the same. There are three major types of trust. Three major types of trust. The first one is what we call functional trust. Functional trust. Functional trust is I'll do what I said I'll do. So if I say to my wife, my love, I will fetch Samuel from his play date, then I'll go and buy bread and milk, then I should be at home by 6 p.m. If she believes that Paul will do what he said he would do, it means there's some degree of functional trust in the relationship. If I say to you, guys, don't worry, we'll make sure you get the slides and the recording. If you don't get that after 2 months or so, guess what has happened? I've just taken a withdrawal from my trust bank account with you. You see, with everyone that you relate to, you've got a trust bank account with them, right? And when you fail to deliver on a promise, that's a withdrawal from that trust bank account. The last thing I want to do is to get into overdraft with you. Does that make sense? So trust is a currency. Trust is a currency. That's why you often say things like, oh, I've got relational capital with those people. You know, what do we mean? It's all a currency. So that's functional trust. This is to do with keeping your promises. The second type of trust is relational trust. And relational trust is, I feel safe with you. I can share with you my secrets and I know you're not going to victimize me. I can share with you my stuff and I know I won't feel judged. Ask yourself, why do people open up to that person and they don't open up to me? Okay? I'm not saying we want everyone in the world opening up to us, right? But when you've got relational trust with people, it's easier working with them. The worst thing is if you're at work and you're sitting down in a meeting and you're always second-guessing yourself and the other person, re-explaining yourself, over-explaining yourself, because there's no relational trust. I still remember in one particular thing at one of the banks I was dealing with, I said to them, guys, and it was a functional team, I said, how many of you can give 10 out of 10 to someone on this team for relational trust? One lady raised her hand. She said, yes, 3 people, this person, that person. I can give them 10 out of 10 for relational trust. I trust them with my life. And often we work with people like that. In fact, it's actually been found that a lot of times people don't leave a particular job because they've actually got a best friend there. They might not call the person a best friend, but when you look at the qualities of a best friend, tick, 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 tick. They know your stuff. The other person you call a best friend, they only know when you update them after 3 months, okay? But that person you're working with day in, day out is looking at you and they're like, okay, what did he do to you last night, okay? They're seeing everything real time, right? So relational trust is not just for personal relationships. It's also with the people that we are working with. Make sense? Okay? And then capability trust. Capability trust. Capability trust is, I trust in your capability. I know you can deliver. And sometimes you can look at yourself and you can say, where am I in my trust bank account when it comes to capability trust with my boss? And sometimes you have to be honest with yourself and say, they're always micromanaging me. I'm not too sure if it's that high. Maybe they don't trust me. What can I do to show them that I'm capable? How can I go from 4 out of 10 to 8 out of 10 in my trust bank account with them? So can you see that trust is not static? It's actually something we can build. And successful people know this. So they're always trying to find ways of building trust with people, especially people who are high in terms of their emotional intelligence. They're aware of it. If I gave some of you this exercise and I said to you, where do you think you are in your trust bank account with that person that you report to or with your spouse? Many people say to me, Paul, I actually don't know. I need to have a conversation with them. And maybe you should have the conversation with them. Other people, their emotional intelligence is very high and they can say, you know what? I think I'm probably on about 4 out of 10. I need to actually work on this relationship. Okay? Now, it's important to ask yourself, what causes trust to break down in my life? And here are the major things. The first one is failure to deliver on promises. Think about times when trust has been eroded in your relationships with people. Often it's because of failure to deliver on promises. Now remember, people do business with brands they trust, and you're a brand. People do business with brands they like. People do business with brands that they have an emotional connection with. So it's in our interest, isn't it, to explore what have I done to erode trust, failure to deliver on promises, hidden expectations about what will be achieved. Hidden expectations about what will be achieved. Ever gone to a meeting and you think this is the reason for the meeting? And then once you get to the meeting, you're like, oh, it's actually something else. Okay? Or scope creep. Do you guys call it scope creep here? Scope creep, especially for people in IT, in information technology. Right? You're invited into a thing. Oh, Pascal, can you come and please help us on this project? And Pascal thinks he's just helping out. A few weeks later, what happens? It's like, Pascal, so how far are we on the project? A month down the line. So what are the next steps, Pascal? Now you're leading it. These guys snuck up on me. Okay? Hidden expectations about what will be achieved. Talking negatively outside meetings. This is a biggie. Have you noticed that often at work, there's the meeting before the meeting, and then there's the meeting after the meeting. It erodes trust, doesn't it? And for those of you who go to the loo together during the meeting, there's the meeting during the meeting. If you want to kill gossip in your organization, right, if you're leading a team, then squash it. If someone brings up something that they should have brought up in the meeting, just say to them, listen, why don't you bring it up in the meeting? Why is this all in the background? It kills team dynamics, okay? But we often do this, and it erodes trust. Cliques and subgroups, especially if you're a leader. In one organization, a guy said to me, Paul, you know what our problem is in this company? Our problem is that whenever there's important information that needs to be communicated, there's always that one group that seems to know before everyone else. And I wasn't talking about a leadership team. It was just that one group, that clique, that the leader is a part of also. Okay? So you want to also kill that. And then lack of communication. Especially if you're a leader, you want to make sure that you're over-communicating, even when there's nothing to communicate. You know, when you get up and you say to people, guys, we're still on track. This is what we want to do. This is what we want to achieve. We're just waiting for so-and-so to come back from maternity leave so that we can get her signature. She'll be back next week and then we'll continue. You know why? If leaders aren't over-communicating, people come up with their own stories. If you study the psychology of rumors, a rumor is a story, isn't it? Why do rumors spread? Because leaders aren't talking about the true story. They aren't telling people the true story. Okay? Not raising problems, rather collecting injustices. Is this causing trust to be eroded in your relationships? Not raising problems, rather collecting injustices. So when does this happen? This is where I come up to Alan and I'm like, oh, Alan, remember 3 months ago when we had that conversation? I was quite offended with by how you spoke to me. And Alan is thinking to himself, Paul, that was 3 months ago. In the meantime, in between time, you were responding to my emails. We had nice Skype calls with each other. You laughed at my jokes, Paul. You even sent me a birthday present. But here you are actually carrying this issue. So from now onwards, when I'm dealing with you, Paul, I need to see beneath the smile. Can you see trust has been eroded? And that's why I always say to people, if you've got an issue with someone, deal with it, especially in the workplace. Deal with it that same week. Because when you allow it to fester, what happens to things that fester? They begin to smell, don't they? All right? So we need to work on the trust thing. Successful people have a well-defined personal brand. They have a well-defined personal brand. What is your personal brand? Your personal brand involves this: managing maximizing and optimizing how you present yourself to the world. If I say to you, I've got the best water in the world, mineral water that I'm selling, but if I haven't got packaging that actually describes that it's the best in the world, then there's no point, is there? There's no point. You're not going to buy it because the packaging wasn't great. So when we're talking about your brand, we're talking about how you are packaged, but the substance inside the packaging has to back up the packaging. Does that make sense? It's not just impression management. Okay? Your personal brand is whatever's left in people's mind space after they've interacted with you. How many of you are into speedboats? Okay, speedboats. Okay, so you guys aren't into football, not into speedboats, not into...
would be into speedboats if I could afford them.
Okay, that's good. All right, but you know what? If you're in a speedboat, what do you leave behind you in the water? It's called the wake, isn't it? You leave something in your wake. So there's what I call your relational wake. When I leave, you'll either be feeling like, oh, I'm glad he's gone, or you might be feeling energized or inspired, hopefully the latter, right? So the point is, your personal brand is whatever's left in people's mind space after they've interacted with you, right? You're a brand. I'm a brand. Now, here's the interesting thing. There was a lady who I once coached a bit, and her name was Miss Fix-It. That's what they called her at work, Miss Fix-It. Why did they call her that? She was always solving everyone's problems, right? I had to then help her with boundaries, okay? Because the strength overused becomes a weakness, isn't it? Okay? So that's an example. Now, there are MDs today, managing directors today, who literally see someone walking down the corridor and they're like, take cover. And they go and they hide in their office because of the person's brand. Because that person is someone maybe who always wants something from you. You know those people? Gimme, 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 my name is Jimmy. Gimme, 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 my name is Jimmy. They always want something from you. And it's become their brand. I know a particular lady, she said to me, Paul, you know what? Whenever so-and-so, because she talks so much, whenever she's coming down the corridor, sometimes I know it's not great, Paul, but sometimes I literally pick up my phone and I pretend I'm on the phone just to avoid that person. That's the person's brand. When people look at you, are they thinking, this is a brand I want to connect with, let's do business? Or are they looking and they associate your presence with something negative? Okay? Now, if you look at all these are brands, right? These are brands. What comes to mind when you think of Coca-Cola? Original, brrr, open happiness. Why is no one saying sugar? Okay, people are now saying it, right? Why is no one saying dental bills, diabetes? The fact of the matter is this is the strongest brand in the world, partly because they've worked on it. I remember a few years ago, I was in Egypt and I was teaching there, doing a workshop for one of the companies. And I remember being in, I think it was at the airport, and I see this Coke can. I didn't understand the Arabic writing on it, but it was distinct. I knew it was Coca-Cola. Now, maybe some of you feel like you're a no-name brand. Nothing wrong with being a no-name brand. It's just a bit cheaper, but there's nothing wrong with being a no-name brand, right? But why don't you say to yourself, what am I going to do to increase my brand equity? What am I going to do to actually increase my brand's value? If Coca-Cola can spend so much money working on their brand, having us saying all these positive things about it, even though it's not that healthy, right? Why can't I work on my brand? Why can't you work on your brand? People buy from brands they like. People buy from brands they have an emotional connection with. People buy from brands they trust. Apple. How many of you are Apple people here? I like that. I can see you're passionate about it. Now, here's an interesting thing. If I come up with a chair like this and I say to you guys, you know what? Apple has come out with new ergonomically designed office furniture. And then I even put a fake, I'll be conning you, I put a fake Apple logo here, right? The Apple people will buy it. Do you know why? Because you're already part of the Apple tribe. You're already part of the Apple tribe. So it's not so much, oh, what is Apple going to produce now? What are they going to come up with? It's the fact that it's from Apple. And here's the thing. You want your brand to be so strong, your personal brand to be so strong that people are like, you know what, Paul, come, you know our stuff. With a lot of my clients that know me well, they don't tell me what to do with their people. They're like, Paul, what do you think? You know our people. Just go for it. Do your thing, Paul. They've bought into Paul's brand. Does that make sense? Okay. So you are a brand. Who's that? That's Nelson Mandela. What comes to mind when you think of Nelson Mandela?
Wisdom.
Wisdom? Liberation? Robben Island, yeah. Okay, all sorts of things come to mind. Right? Now, here's the interesting thing. What about Alan Taylor? What comes to mind when you think of Alan? Those of you who know him.
Good friend.
Good friend? Friendly? Trustworthy? He told you there was coffee? Okay. But here's interesting. Sorry? Honest guy. So honest, trustworthy keeps coming up. That tells you something about his brand, isn't it? Okay. Now, some of you might not know this guy, but this is Oscar Pistorius. Okay? The South African, he's a Blade Runner. He was a Blade Runner, right? And this is one of the courtroom photos, isn't it? Right? Because about 6.5 years ago, he murdered his girlfriend on Valentine's Day. Okay? Now, when people in South Africa, when I show this picture to people in South Africa, there's a lot of emotion in the room. And we almost feel a bit confused. It's kind of like you're a bit angry, you're sad. You think of Riva Steenkamp, who was his girlfriend. You think of all sorts of things. But if it was 6.5 years ago or 7 years ago and I showed you this picture, completely different set of emotions, right? So do you know what this shows me? Your brand can change. And your brand can change because of something that just took you a few minutes to do. So it takes us years to build strong brands, years of consistent behavior to build strong brands. But sometimes there's certain time bombs in us, character flaws. You know time bombs? Tick, 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 tick. Hasn't exploded yet. But at a certain point, maybe it's exploding now. At a certain point, it can explode. And guess what ends up happening? That brand you've built up is destroyed. So ask yourself, what am I doing right now that's building my brand and will help me become successful? What am I doing right now that's maybe a time bomb? What am I doing right now that's a brand destroyer? And here's the thing, we can manage it. We're in charge of our lives. That's Lyra, she's a famous singer. She's a famous singer. I want to start landing, and I want to say to you that one of the keys to being successful is gratitude, an attitude of gratitude. Gratitude is one of those character traits that's different to others. Grateful people are happier. Grateful people sleep better at night because they've got positive thoughts before they go to bed. In fact, some research was carried out where they basically got a number of people whose emotional well-being wasn't great. And they said, write a letter of gratitude to someone where you're grateful for a particular thing. And when these people took that letter to that individual, you might have heard the story, when they took that letter to that individual, their emotional well-being went up by 10%. They improved their sense of health, right? The people who sustained that were people who came up with gratitude journals. What's a gratitude journal? It's where you write out 3 to 5 things each day that you're grateful for. There's something about gratitude. Often in an exercise I get companies to do, I say to them, what do you like about your organization? And then they shout out all the things that they like. Oh, the culture, the people. They shout out all sorts of things. And then I say, you know what? There's so many compliments flying around the room. What are you feeling right now in the room? And they say, sure, we just feel so energized. We feel great. The atmosphere, the climate, people are laughing. And I say to them, you can actually shape that. What would happen if you start off your day reminding yourself of all the things that you're grateful for? It empowers you, doesn't it? One of the ways I like starting my day is maybe saying things like, I'm really grateful that today I'm going to be meeting people who are influential, who will be taking my career to its next level. And guess who I'm always meeting? Those people. Why? Because the way the brain works, you've got your reticular activator. It blocks out the things, the information that is unnecessary, unimportant, and gets you to focus in on what you've chosen to focus in on. Okay? Kids little babies don't have fully developed reticular membranes. They don't. That's why we say when we take if you take your little baby to a noisy place, you say, my child is overstimulated, because they can't distinguish between what's important noise, what's unimportant noise. Okay? Some people might walk the same path as me and they see exactly those same people. And instead of seeing it as a positive, they're like, oh, take cover, I'm in trouble, let me avoid that individual. I'm seeing it as an opportunity. Someone once said, what you think about and what you think about is what you eventually bring about. You get what you appreciate. In my relationship with my wife, the more I speak to the treasure that's in her, my love, I love this about you. I love this about you. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for that. She becomes more of that. If I say to that Paul over there, who I'm getting to know better and I like him a lot, if I say to him, hey, Paul, you crack me up. You've got such a good sense of humor. What's he going to spend the rest of the afternoon doing? Cracking jokes. Okay? So gratitude is so key in communicating it to people, but having an attitude of gratitude. Extremely powerful. Okay. They're mobilized for a cause. They're mobilized for a cause. McKinsey did some work on some women, and they also on men, and they got similar results. And it was women who were successful but healthy, because you can be successful but unhealthy. And they found 5 common denominators, and they called it centered leadership. Centered leadership. And guess what they found? What one of the common denominators was? Women who were successful but healthy. I've moved on from gratitude now. But there were elements of positivity. There were elements of positivity. Let me just say what it was. Exactly. A sense of meaning. A sense of meaning. Their work was meaningful. They found meaning in it. You know the old story, right? Of a guy who's walking and he sees some bricklayers. And he asks the one bricklayer, he says, what are you doing? The guy says, I'm laying bricks. Ask the next guy who's doing exactly the same thing. What are you doing? He says, I'm building a wall. Ask the next guy who's right next to him, what are you doing? I'm building a cathedral. Same activity, different sense of meaning. One of the things I've seen is the people who really climb to the top of that corporate ladder, but the right way. A lot of them, it's not just a job. For a lot of them, there's a sense of meaning behind it, and that gives them the energy to do the work. So here's my question to you. What is your cause? What is your cause? Is what you're doing just a job, or is there a cause behind it? There's a lady who worked for a well-known organization, and she was based it's a multinational in the telecoms industry. She was based in East Africa, I think it was Kenya, and she headed up the apps there. So she was quite a technical woman, but you wouldn't hear talking much about her apps. You'd keep on hearing her talking about how great the East African developers were, software developers, young software developers. And as she spoke about them, she would link up these young software developers with people at Harvard. That was her cause. You don't have to work for an NGO to have a cause. Maybe for some of you, your cause is, you know what? I was raised by a single mom, born on the wrong side of the railway track, but I want to inspire the people I'm managing at work, the people I'm leading at work. I want to show them that they can do it too. Maybe that's your cause. And that gives you the fuel to do what you need to do. And then finally, build on your strengths. Do what you are born to do. You see, your job is what you were trained to do, and your job is what you are paid to do. But your work in life is what you were born to do. What were you born to do? Do you believe people are just these random things that just are lucky if they're successful? Or do you believe that you are wired for a purpose? And here's the interesting thing for me. I've got a tool that can help you discover, to some extent, what your strengths are. Answer the following questions. For what do you receive the most compliments? Don't worry about the question, but just answer it. Just jot down whatever it is that comes to your mind. What do you receive the most compliments for? Even if it's your hairstyle, maybe you're just good at beautifying things. What do you receive the most compliments for? Next question. For what are you the go-to person? People come to you for that particular thing. Is it your writing skills? Is it comfort? Is it counsel? Is it advice? What is it? You know what I find really scary? Sometimes I speak to people and they think that the thing that they're supposed to be doing in life is radically different from what they're already doing. You know, they're like, I should be farming beans in Bloemfontein. For those of you who know Bloemfontein, okay, it's in part of South Africa, right? A lot of people don't necessarily say that. Very often your purpose in life is a subset of something you're already doing. It's just that you don't do it that often. Often I ask people and I'll say, okay, what do you love doing? And they might say something like, you know what, I love it when I'm training and giving solutions to my clients. And I say, how much of your time at work do you spend doing that? 10, maybe 11% of my time, 13%, 17%. It's never an even number, I don't know why. 23%. Okay, and my job as a coach is to say, how can we take it from 23% to 60%? So that you're spending more time doing what you were born to do. Some of the people you look at and you admire and you say, wow, that great leader over there. And you think it's because they're exceptionally gifted, but they're not. They're usually not. It's because they spend most of their time doing what they were born to do. And because they spend most of their time doing what they were born to do, they get good at it because they practice it a lot. If you look at me right now, am I reading notes? I'm not reading notes, I'm just talking. It's very natural, right? Do I look stressed? Maybe I'm a bit tired, but it's natural. I'm doing what I was born to do. This is what I was born to do. Does that make sense? Right? You might say, but Paul, how does Paul remember all those points and all those facts? This is what I spend most of my days doing. So I practice it a lot. Does that make sense? So I found what I'm passionate about and I do it a lot. Okay? So don't get into this thing of like, if you see someone who's good at what they do, you think like, oh, it's just like some... No, they're doing, yes, they're gifted at it, but they do it a lot and they become better. What's that for you? Another question, what comes easily to you where others seem to struggle? You've noticed that the people around you seem to struggle with it and you almost don't understand why they struggle so much with it. But for you, it's easy. What do you do that is high impact, yet it requires relatively little effort on your part? So the results are phenomenal, but if you're honest with yourself, you do it effortlessly. Getting up and speaking in front of you right now, it's not difficult for me, right? But some of you afterwards might say, Paul, thank you. You really poured yourself out for those 2 hours with us. Sure, it must be hard work, hey? You can rest on the plane. Robert earlier on was joking with me and he says, you'll get your rest on your plane. But it's energizing for me doing this. Yes, I'll feel tired afterwards and so on, right? What's that for you? Are you good with your hands? Fixing things. And I'll say, oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And you're like, it's easy, Paul. Surely you can also do it. I'm like, no. What do you get so absorbed doing that you lose track of time? You get so absorbed doing this particular thing, and people are like, it's supper time now. It's tea time now. It's lunch time now. I don't know, you guys don't have one of those. There's one of those that you don't do or something, eh? If I was to phone you at 2 a.m. and ask you to do this, you would quite happily do it. 2 a.m. I was to phone you and ask you to do this, you would get up and you'd do it without complaining or grumbling. What's that? What's that thing where people come and they thank you profusely for it? Thank you for all the hard work. Thank you for the sacrifice. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, you knew that you just winged it. What's that thing for you? I hope you've written down certain things, because whatever those things are, that's the beginning of a powerful journey, or the continuation of a powerful journey in figuring out your life purpose, your life calling. And I'd encourage you to start there, to build on those particular things, to set goals around those particular things. And I'm looking forward to watching this space. I also want to encourage you, if you would like to send me an email or have a look at my website, or send me an email and get more material from me, just grab my card here. You'll see my email address, paul@corporatelegends.co.za, or you can contact me through paulnyamuda.com. And I've got lots of stuff that I'll freely just make available to you, okay? Just to keep you going in this process, this journey of unleashing greatness and understanding what successful people do differently. I'll end with this quote. So you can't see it fully, but consciously, I teach what I know. Unconsciously, I pass on who I am. I want to encourage you, don't just focus on what you know in your head, but focus on who you are, because that's what you'll pass on. Thank you.